Fáilte ach duine go dtí an ácáid speisialta seo. Tá fíormhuíocht dí a bheith linn an trónán inniu. Ach is mór an trua go bhfuil sé ar lína agus nach bhfuil míad go léir an seo in pásanta. An bhlionnse chuan tá súlagam. You're all very welcome to this year's Good Governance Awards Winners Announcement event. Back in the spring, when we were planning the awards and the event, we were very much sure that we could have it back in an in-person event, and we were hoping we'd be able to recreate that fantastic buzz of excitement and networking that we had in the National Concert Hall. But as we saw the numbers increase, we felt we needed to revert to an online event. Chartered Accountants had very kindly agreed to host it, but we said no, in the interest of safety, it'd be probably best that we would have just the judges here and the keynote speaker. So we were delighted. You can imagine the mad scrambling around when we said, well, plan A had failed, what are we going to do, what's plan B? So we were delighted at very short notice that Arthur Cox stepped into the breach and agreed to host a hybrid event for us today. I want to give special thanks to Roisin O'Neill and Anne Frayne and the whole events team in Arthur Cox for their wonderful work and support over the last few weeks to make sure that this event happened and goes so well. The awards for the annual report are now in their 6th year, and I'm delighted to say that they are going from strength to strength. We had a record number of entries this year, and in most of the categories, we are seeing the standard increasing, and this is genuinely making it a harder job to identify which organisations get shortlisted and then to pick the overall winners. In many cases, it's down to very small margins and points of difference that can decide who gets selected and who doesn't. Charities and non-profit organisations are very dependent on public trust for their support and sustainability. An organisation's annual report is a very important communication mechanism to tell the story of the organisation. Why do you exist? What do you do? What difference are you making in your communities and for your beneficiaries? It is also an opportunity to demonstrate to your stakeholders your organisation's commitment to accountability, transparency, and the annual reports that are submitted to the Good Governance Awards for non-profits are assessed and judged in 6 key areas that should be addressed in every annual report. These are, number 1, your organisation's mission, purpose and objectives. 2, your strategy and performance. 3, outputs, outcomes and impact. 4, your funding. 5, how the governance of the organisation. And 6, the financial reporting and the financial statements for the organisation. We didn't have a Good Governance Initiative Award this year, and I know a number of people have contacted me inquiring about it and disappointed that we didn't. We've paused that competition while we figure out how best we can use it as part of our aim of improving governance standards in the non-profit sector. But back to the annual report awards. It is now a very big operation to organise and to conduct awards. There are an awful lot of people involved in making it happen and ensuring that it operates to the high standards. Go to the next slide. There's a few people I need to thank. First of all, I would like to thank our partners for their financial support in sponsoring the Good Governance Awards. Running an event like this does incur costs, and the sponsorship helps us to offset these costs. So a big thank you to Chartered Accountants Ireland, Department of Rural and Community Development, Ecclesiastical, Mason Hayes and Curran, Mazars, the Community Foundation of Ireland, and 2 We're so glad that you are our sponsoring partners for this award. Next slide. We also have a number of fantastic organisations that are our supporters. They play an important role in developing the good governance concept and promoting the awards with their stakeholders. And our supporters in 2021 were, bear with me 1 second, the screen is a bit, bear with me, get this organised, so I don't want to miss anybody, so I have them here. Our supporters for 2021 were Board Match, CPA Ireland, the Charities Institute Ireland, Vocus, Include, Pobble, Sport Ireland, the Chartered Governance Institute, ICSA, The Wheel and Volunteer Ireland. So thank you all for all your great help and support and encouragement through 2021. Every entry goes through a very rigorous assessment over a 3-stage process. We have over 80 people involved across all 3 stages. I was doing a quick thought of the number of hours involved to complete the different assessments and to finalise our category winners. And it is a big number, and I know I've underestimated talking to some of the judges here today and the amount of work that they've put into it. But the number I've come up with, and I know it's an underestimate, is about 1,500 hours, or in, put it another way, 200 work days involved in this process. And knowing the hourly rates that some of our assessors, accountancy firms and judges charge for their clients, the value of this pro bono work from our assessors and our accounting firms and judges is in excess of €250,000. So on purely pragmatic terms, without this fantastic support and this voluntary commitment, we would have no awards, because it would not be feasible to run the awards without this support. There are so many, too many to name individually, so I'll just put them up on the screens there. You saw our assessors in stage 1. They're back there. There are assessors in stage 1. Then we have in stage 2, we have 8 accountancy firms that do the technical assessments, to review the financial statements, to make sure that they are compliant with the necessary standards, and that then feeds into the judges. And there you can see a panel of our judges this year in assessing the shortlisted entries. I would like to also thank 2 people who work behind the scenes and making sure that the process is well run and run very, very efficiently, and take an awful lot of worry and stress from me, and they are Roisin McGuigan and Bob Semple. So thank you, Roisin and Bob, for all your great work. It really, really makes a big difference. The running order for this evening is as follows. After my introduction, which you'll be glad to know is coming to a conclusion, we will have an address from our keynote speaker. Then a representative from each of the 7 category judging panels will give an overview of their judging of the shortlisted entries, and they will announce the winners, which probably of most interest for people listening in at them today. Then, after that, I will do a short wrap-up of the evening. A feature of our awards event since its inception is to have a distinguished speaker to share their thoughts on the sector, on key developments, challenges, opportunities. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this year, Helen Martin, CEO of the Charities Regulator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dermot. It's a real honour to be invited here this evening to deliver the keynote address for the 2021 Good Governance Awards. Although familiar with public speaking and having listened to many amazing keynote addresses, I've never delivered one myself, so I possibly should have told Dermot when he asked me, but I was so excited to be asked, I said, I'll just do it. But I'm very interested in the origin of words. So one of the things I said is I'm going to look up keynote, and I think I could have figured this one out myself. And I'm looking at a board member here, and I know he's very musical, so I'd say he's figured it out. But I'm quoting from a gentleman called Kevin Indig here, and what he explains it as meaning is that it stems from music. A cappella singers needed to hear a note to get the tune of the song right. That became the keynote. The word carried over from music to the defining presentation as just like its origin. I'm not going to lie, my immediate thought on reading that was, wow, that's some responsibility. Quickly followed by, how on earth am I going to move anybody on the subject of governance? So what I'd say is, whatever about my address this evening, certainly in the Charities Regulator, my experience is that there is absolutely no doubt that governance within an organisation has the capacity to prompt quite an array of human emotions, as all of the participants here tonight will definitely attest to, I'm sure. In thinking about emotional responses, though, I was struck by one of the early encounters that our head of compliance monitoring, Yelena Grushenko, mentioned to me, which arose in the context of our one-to-one engagement with registered charities in relation to the Charities Governance Code. We wanted to understand at an early stage what the main issues that registered charities were encountering were. The idea being that we don't have infinite resources, so in order to support charities, we wanted to make sure that we were providing guidance that would be of the most practical use to them on a day-to-day basis. So Yelena took me through a number of issues that seemed to be most common, and we discussed those. Then she mentioned one case where a charity that she was talking to had contacted her. It was a charity trustee, and he was apoplectic about the code. Why did his charity have to do this? Did we not realise that the code was taking them away from doing the important work that they were set up to achieve? He's a volunteer doing this in his spare time. This was bureaucracy gone mad, and you get the picture. But keen to focus on the specifics so that she could assist the gentleman in question, Yelena politely inquired as to the particular standards that were causing difficulty for the charity so that she could assist. At which point, the gentleman in question apparently somewhat reluctantly acknowledged that, in fact, he'd never read the code and that his fellow trustees had not started going through the compliance record form. Now, I would say this was last year, so they had plenty of time, and Yelena did say that to him. But it's a perfect example of where the mere idea of governance had clearly raised such fear among charity trustees that the response had been to do absolutely nothing. While anyone who's ever had to do a regulatory impact assessment will know, and being a civil servant, I definitely know about those, doing nothing can sometimes be, a valid option. But when it comes to governance, it's just never an option. So with that, Yelena took the trustee through what was required, and obviously did that very well, because she told me that subsequently he came back to her, and she couldn't actually believe it. He was almost evangelical about the code and the positive experience that he'd had when he actually brought the subject up with his colleagues. And we've heard that quite a lot. But it struck me as well when I attended a talk recently on diversity and inclusion. One of the speakers who was an expert in the area observed that too often diversity and inclusion training focused on all the things that shouldn't be done, meaning that attendees often left the training feeling overwhelmed and actually thinking, you know what, it's safer if I just don't do anything rather than try and do something. And as I listened to that discussion, it struck me that this might also be true when it comes to the governance code and what some charities are feeling about it. That it's overwhelming, and as a result, they may decide not to do anything. They may feel almost paralysed with thoughts of the amount of work that they think they haven't done that needs to be done, and then have a fear of what might happen in terms of the charities regulator's response or the response of a key funder. But what we've actually seen in practice in the charities regulator, and we've been doing some monitoring, we've been getting in touch with hundreds of charities, if I'm honest, over the last 2 years, is that people are most resistant and critical of the code, at least initially, when they haven't actually engaged with it. And once they start engaging with it, they can often become its biggest advocates. Because what they realise is the following. They're already meeting many of the standards that are set out in the code. They're already doing the things that good governance entails. And for standards that they're not meeting fully, they've identified a reason in place to meet that standard. Again, they're meeting the code. Sometimes they think they're not meeting the standard because they haven't actually done what's in the standard. But if they've a plan, they've discussed it, in our view, they are meeting the standard. Because at the end of the day, what I would say is, if you're sitting at a board meeting as a senior manager or a board member, or charity trustee as we would call them, I'm conscious there's not-for-profits here tonight that aren't charities, but if you're sitting at a board meeting and you are raising queries about the charity's monthly accounts, which you have had an opportunity to fully review before the meeting because you received them in advance in good time, and your queries and those of your fellow board members are being answered confidently and respectfully by the person responsible for preparing those accounts, then you are experiencing good governance in practice. Similarly, if for whatever reason you're unable to attend a board meeting, but the board papers and minutes of the meeting leave you in no doubt as to what was discussed and what was decided in your absence and why, then again, you're experiencing good governance in practice. Finally, if you're sitting at a board meeting as a senior manager or board member and you're being updated about the outcome of a procurement process, where multiple tenders or quotations were invited from different parties and they were received. They were then assessed against predefined criteria. And you as a board member or senior management or member of the senior management team, you're clear on why a particular supplier has been chosen and the cost associated with the proposed contract. Then again, you're experiencing good governance in practice. But even where standards of governance are high in an organisation, that's not to say that things are never missed. There will always be those moments when something happens and you will realise that a particular policy or an associated process is no longer fit for purpose. But if you've got a strong governance framework in place, then your capacity to continually adapt to that and to maintain good governance is substantially increased. Depending on the size and complexity of your organisation, from time to time you may need external assistance, and you may need that assistance in relation to governance matters. But I appreciate that not everyone has the luxury of external experts and professional advice. Given that when you exclude schools, 58% of registered charities have income of less than $250,000, and 25% of registered charities have income of less than $25,000, no one is more conscious of this than the charities regulator. So for this reason, we've spent considerable time and resources over the last few years developing guidance, templates, samples, other written and audio, visual content and materials, which are available on the Governance Code area of our website for everyone to use. The Good Governance Awards is another way in which you can test how well you're doing. Of particular interest, certainly to me, is the process, the hard work and the commitment that culminates in these awards. As an organisation, you can volunteer to have governance within your organisation, as evidenced by your annual report and your financial statements, assessed by a third-party expert, and depending where you get in the process, there'll be a promise of invaluable feedback and of a practical nature that is directly relevant to your organisation. In addition, there's the potential for public recognition through nomination or placement in the awards themselves. While convincing people of the merits of good governance can be challenging, I fully appreciate that it is an entirely different matter to convince a board or senior management team to voluntarily submit their organisation's governance to third-party scrutiny. So to everyone here this evening who participated, I absolutely salute you, because I know that's a really difficult process to go through even of itself. So one of the challenges for those working to embed good governance practices, and this applies to everyone, the Charities Regulator is a public body. We have a code of governance that we have to comply with as well. One of the real challenges is that there's no end point. Good governance needs to be an ongoing part of any organisation's day-to-day activities. But by systematically going through each standard in the code, whether the first time or in subsequent reviews, any gaps and weaknesses can be identified and plans put in place to improve existing policies and procedures. So it really is a living document, and we always just say to charities, you'll be coming back to this. You will be looking at this again if you're doing things right. I've heard this described as a periodic due diligence exercise to confirm that a charity has the capacity, the systems, the controls, really important, and capability to deliver what it was set up to achieve. That process of review and reflection is really, really important. As Warren Buffett said, chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. And what's fit for purpose at one point in time for your organisation may not be fit for purpose at another time. Changes to working practices and service delivery due to COVID are probably the most obvious example. A similar prompt for review and reflection in the context of a charity specifically might be a substantial change in a charity's fortunes. A large donation, for example. That might actually move a small, locally focused, volunteer-only charity into an entirely new sphere, and will likely require significant changes to things like their internal financial controls and service development and delivery, and may even require the employment of staff, which a charity may not be familiar with, and that in itself is a huge exercise. If a charity has never had paid staff, this can be a significant change for charity trustees to ensure that it's done right. Open recruitment, written contracts of employment, payment of employee taxes and contributions to revenue. We've come across a number of charities that have found themselves in difficulty as they didn't understand the significance of employing people. So it's something that I would just say to charities to be very, very careful about, and to approach it and try and get as much assistance as you can when you're taking that really crucial step. If you're a charity and you are embracing good governance, as trustees, you are using it as a way to honestly assess the way in which your organisation is operating and the extent to which you and your senior team, your staff, if you're lucky enough to have them, and your volunteers are meeting the 6 principles of charity governance, which means that your charity is advancing its charitable purpose only. You're not getting sidetracked and using charity assets for activities that don't advance your charitable purpose and that don't deliver public benefit. Your charity is behaving with integrity. You and everyone working in the charity are clear on the charity's values, what the charities stand for. As a board, you are truly leading people within your organisation. Everyone understands in the organisation the charity's values, as I've said, the importance of adhering to the charity's policies and procedures, the necessity for good governance. As a board, you're also truly exercising control. You know what's going on, you know what activities your charity is engaged in, your charity's finances, you know what risks your charity faces. As a board, you work effectively. You hold your board meetings, you circulate agendas and board papers in advance. All decisions are recorded in your minutes. When conflicts arise, you deal with them because they will always arise. You engage respectfully with your senior management team, your staff, your volunteers, and with each other. And finally, your charity is accountable and transparent. Charities of a certain size that are companies are legally entitled to submit abridged accounts to the company's registration office. You might be one of them. But if you're really applying the principle of accountability and transparency and you're really embracing that, you won't be filing abridged accounts because you know that they provide little or no detail on the charity's finances that would be of any use to any stakeholder or member of the public that are looking for them. You publish and submit a full set of accounts so that any interested stakeholder can understand the charity's true financial position, its income, its expenditure, its balance sheet, and its activities in the previous financial year, demonstrating a real commitment to the principle of accountability and transparency in practice. The success of the Charities Governance Code, and I'm always saying this and I apologise because I know people are probably sick of hearing it, but it is a mechanism to enhance levels of public trust and confidence in your individual charity and in the sector as a whole. But it very much depends, and its ability to do that very much depends on the extent to which the code is embraced by charity trustees and embedded as part of the standard thing that you do on a day-to-day basis. We know from the results of our first survey of the public, the Charities Regulator published that earlier this year, that members of the public express the highest levels of trust and confidence in the charities that they actually supported. So every day you're getting donations from people and they are supporting you and they trust and they have this level of trust and confidence in you. It's really important that you respect that and that you live up to that. However, if your only concern when it comes to governance is that you're doing what you think the charity's regulator or a large funder wants you to do, then you are entirely missing the point, which is the benefit and the protection that good governance can provide. In those circumstances, the absence of good governance is more likely to lead to the very thing that you're trying to avoid, which is legal and regulatory scrutiny. As I pointed out earlier this week at our Meet the Charities regulator event, a charity won't face immediate regulatory sanction because it failed to declare full compliance with the governance code on its annual report. But it will if the absence of good governance practice means that the charity failed, for example, to keep proper books of account in contravention of the Charities Act 2009. So based on the Charities Regulator's experience of dealing with governance issues within charities over the last few years, it is possible to identify some common features among charities that find themselves in difficulty, which perhaps, unsurprisingly, are common to the types of issues that you see in high-profile corporate failures such as Enron, the Volkswagens of this world, Anglo. And these issues would include the following. So ineffective boards. And what we see there is that you've got trustees sitting on a board who take no active role in overseeing the charity's management administration. Boards that don't have the right skills mix or expertise to function effectively. This can happen, for example, where you've got boards that are comprised of family and friends, and this may be a historical thing and the charity just hasn't moved on, but it's grown in size, and that board is just no longer fit for purpose. Dominant personalities. So leaving everything to a very dominant chair or a CEO who has a very autocratic leadership style. When we see that, I have to be honest, it's a massive red flag to us. Infighting among charity trustees or between charity trustees and members of the senior management team. Unfortunately, this is something that we are seeing more of. which may in part be due to the stress brought about by the pandemic. But what I would say is, regardless, where this happens, what we normally find is that the board's function is directed entirely away from its duties and responsibilities to the charity. And much needed charity resources are used up, and I say used up is a polite way of saying it, on disputes, when really they should be going towards advancing the charitable purpose. Another common element that we see is poor communication. So even the most capable boards and senior managers cannot oversee the running of and don't know what's going on. But having said that, it's really important that you ask. Similarly, if staff and volunteers feel that they're being kept in the dark, they feel isolated, they can feel disengaged, and as a result, they might be less likely to tell you about the things that they see that would be of concern for you if you knew about them. None of this is good for an organisation. Yet it might surprise you the number of trustees that we encounter that can't, when we talk to them initially, even provide us with the most basic information about their charities. I know on one occasion we were asking someone about the organisational structure. They had 20 members of staff and they couldn't tell us the roles that most of those staff members had. Another one is failure to understand risk. Risk management, and specifically the identification by charities of risks their charities might face and how to manage them. That actually falls under Standard 4.5 of the Charities Governance Code. And it was one of the top reasons that charities this year on their annual reports indicated that they were partially in compliance. So that would indicate to us that, notwithstanding the fact that we have materials out there, we have stuff in the Governance Code toolkit, that we in fact need to do more for charities in that area to be explaining things a little bit better. So you watch this space, because we'll definitely be coming back to charities with some further assistance on that, because it's so crucial. The final one is in relation to that we often see as poor culture. And we see this in the charities regulator when we encounter a culture of lax controls. You go into a charity and there's just nobody following any processes and procedures, documentation can't be found. And this leads to, what we generally see is that this leads to an inappropriate use of charity assets by maybe board members, by staff or volunteers. Expenses claimed without receipts would be another one we see a lot. Contracts signed entailing significant expenditure without any documented board approval. Required policies either not in place or where they are but just not followed by anybody. If your board aren't following them, you can't expect your staff to be following them. The recruitment of staff to pay what is in the best interests of the charity's beneficiaries. I think a lot of these difficulties, I have to say myself, just as an observation, that organisations, including charities, get themselves into from a governance perspective can sometimes stem from the fact that maybe boards have worked together for so long that they're not open to engaging with their stakeholders, and they're no longer able to see challenging questions and constructive feedback as a means to improve their organisation. And this is often characterised by defensiveness, sometimes, if I'm honest, of the indefensible. An inability and an unwillingness to accept that something can still be wrong, even if it's not illegal. As the well-known journalist Fintan O'Toole put it some years ago when commenting on Irish banking, the word of the moment regarding Irish banking, he said, is culture. But it is a euphemism for systematic abandonment of basic ethics of right and wrong. When I encounter defensive behaviour in response to basic queries or requests for information, I have to be honest, it brings that quotation to mind. If you're convinced that what you're doing is right, then why are you so unwilling to justify it? On 2 occasions over the last 2 months, we've had charities argue with us about whether or not directors sitting on their boards, their companies, were charity trustees within the meaning of the 2009 Act. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the Charities Act, that is black and white. They are charity trustees. But the issue arose when it was pointed out to them that their trustees, the list of trustees that they had on the register, wasn't up to date. But the response, instead of being, well, we'll update that, sorry about that, we hadn't realised, was actually to challenge the legal interpretation of what a charity trustee is. If you're not open to feedback and different perspectives, you run the risk that people won't tell you things, and you and your organisation will end up sleepwalking into a crisis, resulting in a level of reputational damage that you may not be able to come back from. The nightmare scenario, as one trustee put it to me recently. To quote again from Warren Buffett, I really like Warren Buffett, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. And I think he's absolutely right. There's no doubt that what's happened over the last 18 months has brought the work that charities do in supporting the most vulnerable in our society into sharp focus. Under the glare of public scrutiny, doing the right thing matters, and the public expects it when you're a charity. Using the governance code and the valuable feedback that you've received from your charity's participation in the Good Governance Awards to assist you to ensure that your charity is well run, they're just two of the ways that you can meet the public's expectations. So I'm going to leave you with two asks. The first one is that you would talk about governance. You've shown great commitment in terms of your participation in these awards here tonight. Let others know your work, what your charity or your organisation is doing in this area, including your participation in these awards. Talk about the benefits you've seen, the resources you found most useful. In this way, you can play your part in moving the narrative away from, the idea that governance is some kind of burden. It's something that people should be fearful of. To governance being part and parcel of what's required to have a positive impact on society. My second ask is that your organisation publish their activities, publicise them. Talk openly about what you've achieved with the resources that you've been gifted by funders and the wider public. The obvious way to do this is through your annual reports and your financial statements. In particular, ensure that you're all publishing full accounts. I'm going to say it again, not abridged accounts. Abridged accounts are all but useless and run contrary, in my view, and I think in a lot of people's view, to Principle 6 of the Code on Accountability and Transparency. As noted under Principle 6, accountability is about being open and transparent about everything your charity does. To quote from the Code, it's about being able to stand over what your charity does and how it does it, and justify this to any person or group who queries what your charity has done or is doing. As Helen Stevenson, Chief Executive of the Charity Commission for England and Wales, recently said, more than ever, people need evidence that charities are not ends in themselves, but vehicles for making the world a better place, both through what they achieve and the values that they live along the way. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. And how do I follow that? My name is Deirdre Garvey, and I've been given the task of speaking to the first of the 7 categories that you see in front of you in the slides. But can I just say thank you hugely to Helen. It's my first time listening to an in-person event, and I must stress that Diarmuid and Arthur Cox and everybody have organised a very, very super safe event. But it's been a real pleasure, and you certainly moved me because I am a corporate governance nerd, so thank you very much for that. And thank you to Diarmuid and Carmichael for inviting me to be one of the judges. Yes, there was a huge amount of work involved, but it was work done pleasurably. And might I add, I am speaking for all of the judges in Category 1. My fellow judges were Geraldine O'Sullivan, manager with Kerry Volunteer Centre, and an expert consultant on governance, Jerry Egan, who also happens to be a board member of Carmichael. So in terms of Category 1, we were judging those organisations with an annual turnover of less than €50,000. So as some of the statistics that Helen just quoted at us, this category represents the smallest organisations in our sector, very often run by pure volunteer only at board and at operations level, but or with sort of a half-time or a full-time administration person or some such, or combination of. They are one of the biggest categories in the sector in terms of numbers of organisations that fall into this category. They're typically community-based, volunteer-only, or part-time staff. And we recognise, we really do, that developing an annual report can be a particular challenge for this cohort of organisation, given their resources and capacity. However, we would encourage all organisations in this category to produce an annual report. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's telling your story. So it's not just the annual income and expenditure that you'd be well used to doing. It's a really, really valuable tool for engaging with stakeholders, the volunteers, the beneficiaries, the supporters, and the wider community. It also shows that commitment to transparency and accountability that Helen just spoke about. So, and again, all of these remarks are remarks on behalf of all 3 of the judges. And in this category, I find myself as a sort of a misnomer turning up at an awards ceremony to tell you that the judges unanimously decided not to make an award winner announcement this year, and consequently, therefore, not to create a shortlist. This is because we deemed that none had sufficiently reached the required standard for a good governance award. These awards stand for something. So, I have to stress that this does not in any way imply that their governance in 2020 was any less than the previous year, where an award was actually made. But what it does mean is that the standard of reporting and storytelling that we were able to read in the documents we were presented with was just not as good or as clear as it was the previous year, enabled to make a decision. So, that definitely does raise questions for how this particular category is approached and engaged with, and I'm sure in the post-match analysis, as they say, meeting that we're going to be having as judges in a few weeks' time, there will be food for thought in there. Certainly the judges from our category, and I think several others, have several good suggestions in relation to the organisers about how we can do things differently next year, and we'll be feeding that into the review. That said, there were definitely positive things that we saw in the entrance and that we received, and I'd like to just go through a couple of them. It was great to see this category had entries at all, right? It really, really was. It's really challenging, especially in the year that was in it with COVID. Whilst many of our small volunteer-led not-for-profits have had to significantly upscale their services as part of the community and voluntary sector's local response to COVID, many others actually, were completely unable to function and had to scale down or indeed close during 2020. So there were also several entries that clearly understood the need to illustrate that they are aware of governance and reporting. The commitment and the passion for the cause really shone clearly through the paperwork, and that's really important. And many of them did include supplementary information that details in great detail where the income came from and how it was spent. And this provided a good picture of the finances and how they were, and that was really welcome. And I guess we've also been asked to sort of say some remarks to advise the people who applied and also potential applicants for next year. Some of the most important areas for improvement in our category we noted for all entrants are, while the main aims and activities were spelled out in some of the reports, there was little or no information with which to assess 2020 performance. What did you do? What did you intend to do? Give us a picture of what that mission statement or that purpose statement meant for your organisation in 2020. So we'd like to see the entrants in this category really double down on clarity around time frame and ensure that the story and the understanding that I have as a reader, that I get from the director's report and the activity report, is the same story that I get from the finances, and that they match the same time frame and the same year, and that you're really clear about that so that the reader knows. You might know, but we don't necessarily know that. We really think that those who entered and went to the trouble should take on board the feedback from the judges, and really well done for putting an entry in the year that was in it. We also really recommend that you attend the trainings offered by Carmichael in partnership with volunteer centres and others on how to write an annual report. We'd love to see the ones who entered this year and more besides enter next year, and we'd really love to see you use the template that's on the Good Governance Awards web. Smaller organisations like you, it's kind of a painting by numbers. It really tells you what to do, and it sort of does the heavy lifting for you. So even if you start by just being able to fill in a few of those categories and fields and build up your sort of ability to do that year on year, we think that would be a great recommendation. And all of that, as Helen really clearly pointed out, showing that you're improving, showing that you're aware, that's what it's all about, and that's what improves governance practice. So can I say congratulations to all of the winners in all of the other categories and all of the shortlisted in the other categories. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much, and I'll move on now, so thank you very much.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Paula Nyland, and I'm here today to, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak for my co-judges, Olga McDonough and Amelia Casey, on Category 2. So just to say, I just want to kind of give people a background to Category 2 initially, and as Helen Martin said, Category 2 under 250,000. And that represents 58%, as Helen said, of charities in Ireland, almost 60% of the population, hugely important for us. And what's very, very important, again, and Deirdre mentioned it, is the dependence on volunteer support. So that's evident again across the applicants in this category. And again, it's just everyone is facing COVID, but these organisations are at the front line. And what's been spectacular is that those volunteers and boards and executives have stood up and taken action, very, very, very to be commended. Just again, I'm reiterating what Helen said earlier. Based on Benefacts data, 40% of this category are filing abridged accounts. That's incorporated charities. They're the ones we can see. So that's 40% are not showing their income and expenditure. And that's what we'd like to shift the dial on that. And what's great here is that the applicants today are in that 60% who are filing full accounts and going that extra mile to communicate this to their stakeholders and beneficiaries in terms of what their organizations are doing and what they're achieving. So I just move on to the next slide to identify those in this category. So we had Embrace Farm, Louth Volunteer Centre, Parent Line, SharingPoint, and Canoeing Ireland. So some really great organisations. And I'm just going to highlight some of the really good good points across the board. One was the clear mission, vision, and strategy. Like these are all under 250,000, and it was as clear for the reader. It was just excellent, very well done. Highly engaged board and executive, and that was really evident in the case studies, stories, testimonials that we saw, which showed the passion that these organisations have for what they do, and the volunteers that stepped up when it was needed this year in particular, well, in 2020 in terms of COVID. Excuse me. Again, which I think is, you're going to hear more about the other categories, but what was very clear here is these organizations were able to articulate their achievements and their challenges and their weaknesses, and in all cases, in all 5, presented those in a transparent way, which is really helpful for stakeholders to understand what's going on in the organization. Look, this is about improving. This great initiative, Good Governance Awards, is about improving our reporting and trying to make that, bring the standard up. And we think we kind of try to pull out a few points where we think organizations could make small changes and improve it dramatically. So one of those would be just linking achievements back to the strategy, linking those activities back to that clear vision and strategy, number one. Quality versus quantity. So we had some excellent case studies and stories and testimonials, but there was quite a bit of repetition, and in some cases quite long, lengthy stories, which could have been edited to be more impactful. So shorter and more impactful is what we thought. In terms of, and this is across the board, and this in previous years in other categories I've seen this, is compare your achievements to your objectives. Yes, this was an unusual year. And again, that's been articulated in terms of COVID. But what's going to be done in the future to change that? How does it compare to prior years? Give us that, and it gives a better understanding in terms of impact on the organisation. Financials, again, some small changes that could be made to make a big difference. There was a use of FRS 102 sections for less disclosure. It's meant more from commercial organisations. People would use the full disclosures. Again, this is about being more transparent and communicating with your beneficiaries and stakeholders. The other one is, don't be afraid to address financial issues in the director's report. There are deficit positions, there are reserve issues, there are problems with funding. Call them out in the director's report and address them, because there was sometimes a very obvious problem in the financials but not mentioned elsewhere in the director's report. And just a small issue, again, for us, which was quite frustrating, there could be very simple errors in the numbers and typos, and we would encourage people to go out and get friends or whatever it is to read and check these things and avoid some of those small issues. So I'm just going to call out in terms of, I'm not going to announce the winner yet, but just in terms of what the winner achieved, and we wanted to call that out, is very clear mission, vision and strategy, and what they achieved and what their priorities were in that year, and linked it back. So again, that goes back to what we're recommending. Actions of the board and the CEO really clearly laid out in terms of how they reprioritized and adjusted. The governance, the outline of the governance, and how that communication worked between subcommittees, extremely clear. They addressed the financial issues within the director's report, so spoke to the reserve issues, and then transparency within the numbers. So providing us with the detail in terms of their costs so people can understand. This is not about state secrets. This is about showing what the issues are, where the money is being spent and what it's being used for. So I'm going to go and announce the winner. So the winner for category 2 today is SharingPoint. So if we could give a round of applause, that's well done, SharingPoint. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Caldwell. I was one of the judges on the judging panel for Category 3, along with Eva Gurn and Tom Courtney. Category 3 is a category for organisations with a turnover of between 250,000 and €1 million. Following the technical assessments, the 5 finalists for this category were as follows: Brighter Communities Worldwide, Children's Rights Alliance Republic of Ireland, Dublin City Volunteer Centre, Spree Agus Sport Family Centre, and Volleyball Association of Ireland. The other judges and I were very pleased to see that all 5 finalists were very high standard and all submitted extremely good annual reports. Each of the reports made excellent use of case studies, which enhanced the reader's understanding of the impact the organisations made. The finalists generally made very good use of metrics to report on the delivery of objectives, key performance indicators, targets, and achievements. Some of the areas for improvement which the judges identified were as follows. The judges all felt there was some inconsistency in the use of visual aids and illustrations across the reports. In some cases, they served to distract from rather than enhance the narrative. Another area the judges focused on was the information around reserves. We would have liked to have seen more attention paid to how reserves, target reserves were set, and also information around the surplus or deficits generated during the year. The highest scoring reports identified actions to take to reach target reserves, or where target were exceeded, plans on how to use these excess reserves. The judges would also like to have seen greater clarity on the recruitment and election of directors, whether the directors were the only members in the company or whether there is a wider group of people who are the members and who elect the directors. So on to the winner. The winning entry in this category told the story of their organisation with a single, clear voice. The report conveyed a sense of community in a very readable and informative way. The report also showcased excellent design with a particular judicious use of visuals, getting the balance correct between text and graphics. The report contains a comprehensive exposition of governance with consistent clarity and transparency throughout. The winner in Category 3 was Volleyball Association of Ireland. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Together with my fellow panellists, Brendan Linehan, Thomas Serovich and Christine Moran, we judged the shortlist entries in Category 4, which is organisations with an annual turnover of between 1 million and €5 million. The shortlisted organisations are the Mary Keating Foundation, ActionAid, Coolmine Therapeutic Community, Laura Lynn, and the Care Trust. On behalf of the panel, I'd like to commend all of the shortlisted organisations. They all do extremely impressive work, and we were struck in each and every case by the life-changing impact that they're making for their beneficiaries. The annual reports showcased this strong impact through graphs and images, as well as beneficiary and volunteer stories, which were very powerful. They all explained well the response of COVID-19 from a risk management perspective. We did, however, at times struggle due to levels of transparency and accountability. Reports didn't always provide clear answers to fundamental questions, particularly around cost to raise funds and how much of the funding went towards beneficiaries or to achieving impact. You'd be expected to have quite technical skills to find the answers. We struggled with some annual reports in terms of their explanation and justification of two areas in particular. The first was the level of costs in operating and promoting the charity, and the second was around reserves policies. So we'd suggest to increase levels of transparency and accessibility. So clearly show where your donor funds go and make the information clear to those with limited technical skills. Improve accountability. Provide greater explanation and justification, particularly where numbers are well outside the average range, so for example in costs or reserves. Increase information provided on the board, diversity disclosures, skills and experiences, and how the board composition reflects the charity's stakeholders. What set the winning entry apart was that they did have a great benefit of simplicity in corporate structure, but they had a well-designed and highly accessible report. It did an excellent job at explaining at a human and practical level what it did, how it did it, and how the money worked. It explained and justified how the money was raised and spent. Objectives were set, and these were monitored, which showed considerable progress made during the year. So the winner is the Mary Keating Foundation. Congratulations.
Hi, good evening. I'm Neil Fitzgerald. I'm the Head of Ethics and Governance in Chartered Accountants Ireland. I'm delighted to represent my fellow judges, Paul Turpin and Siobhan Gallagher, in relation to Category 5, assessment of charities in the range of 5 million turnover to 15 million. The first thing I'll say is that all finalists shortlisted in this category were of a very good standard. However, there were two key differentiators in determining the higher rankings, and those were leadership and innovation demonstrated in the presentation of the annual report. And while all shortlisted charities can be applauded for their resilience and their ability to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, there were marginally higher scores for the organisations that clearly demonstrated robust governance structures that enabled an effective response. And for example, indicating the impact of the pandemic on the original strategic priorities of the charity, and demonstrating board resilience with succession planning already in place without the need to extend the terms of directors unnecessarily. Good standard of disclosure in all of these reports that the readability, clarity and conciseness of the report played a higher role or a bigger role when it came to awarding higher marks. Now, no charity had it all, but as a group they can learn a lot from each other by looking at what each did exceptionally well. As a summary, the following key improvement points could be applied. Ensure consistency between reporting the purpose of the charity, its values, and its strategy. and include insight on the progress against objectives and related targets. It is thrilling to actually read about what these organisations have achieved. It truly is. But without knowing what targets they've set for themselves within a given period, it is difficult for us to understand or fully appreciate just how well they have achieved what they've done. This category showed us that a good standard can be achieved by compliance with minimum requirements. However, a higher standard was achieved by these charities by considering the information needs of key stakeholders. And that came clearly true in some of the information that they detailed in their reports. Now, in an uncertain world, we can but manage key risks within our control. And that includes accepting some level of risk and in working towards managing that. It would be very useful for the charity to disclose its risk appetite and include some narrative as to how it determines what the key risks are and ensures that they are appropriately managed. Now, while all charities in this category are deserving of high praise, there was one clear winner that scored consistently high across all the areas of reported governance assessed. Their report pulled the judges in and kept them engaged throughout. It clearly communicated what the organisation is, why it exists, who and how it benefits, while also showing good governance and a commitment to continuous improvement. It had some very good disclosures in relation to sustainability for this category and provided some of the better insights into its funding, risk management and operations. One of its strategic priorities is to influence change, and it is doing so not only in advancing the mental health of young people in Ireland, but also in its drive to report good governance. Congratulations, Jigsaw. Well deserved. Thank you.
Congratulations to everybody involved in tonight's great good news event. I'm here to speak on behalf of my fellow judges, Dennis O'Connor, Managing Director of 2 and 3, and Philip Smith, partner in Arthur Cox, of course, are also our hosts for this evening. And I'm presenting Category 6. And we have 5 entrants to the category. In alphabetical order: Barnardos, Cooperative Housing, the Central Remedial Clinic, Oxfam and Plan Ireland. Before going to the winning entry, some general comments, first of all, of a positive nature, I suppose, across all the finalists. General standard very high, and we found at this level individual reports excelling in different ways. For example, we saw some really exemplary, actually, standards of e-reading quality. We also saw some exemplary, easily understood and comprehensive reporting of achievements compared with both the previous year and the longer term strategy. Second point, I suppose, all the reports made efforts to state the facts, but they also told the story behind the facts, and they did it in a balanced way. It's fair to say that the best reports were those that actually did in a kind of a seamless way. And I suppose the third point is related to that, and I've seen it in the 5 or 6 years I've been involved with these awards. The trend, all now overwhelming at this level, certainly, in the end of bifurcated reports where you have the activity report and then stuck at the back the annual financial statements, much more integrated approach. We're seeing that almost universally at this level in these. Those that did that well, again, telling the one story with the one voice, but giving the essential detail, did very well. Now, all the charities will get their detailed feedback, as I understand it, from Carmichael over the next number of weeks. So this is some general points, 3 general points and a couple of points under each about suggestions for improvement. First of all, make the reading experience easy and engaging. Our recommendation as a set of judges, I don't think it's in a rule book anywhere, is to make e-reading the assumed main medium for your report and design it accordingly. Secondly, under that heading, would be to be clear on the summary picture before you drill down into the detail. Let's see the wood for the trees. Be conscious of the need to engage the general reader as well as the specialised. The second area would be, I suppose, providing context and texture. Charities are mission-driven by nature, and they're acutely conscious of failings and shortcomings in their sectoral environments. And we know this when we look at the history of all those organisations that we've seen on the screen there. Don't lose that edge, because, you know, we are on a journey towards corporate excellence, but the reason and the raison d'etre of charities also needs to shine through. And we saw some excellent examples of that, but also maybe sometimes we maybe lost sight of it. And secondly, under that heading, describe in brief, maybe using a case study approach, what goes on a little bit under the hood. Operating model, we call it in the judging criteria. It's not the primary purpose of an annual report, but dare I say it, in the case of some charities, for example, international charities who are working through a complex system of intermediaries on the ground in beneficiary countries, I think we could really use some further information on that area in order to understand better what's going on. And finally, be open and exemplary, disclose the challenges and shortfalls honestly. We've heard talk of risk earlier. A really good use of risk registers, but not just the static register, also the movement in the register and residual risk. The best ones, best reports did that very well, and in the course of doing that, increased their credibility with the reader. So, the overall winner I'm going to come to, and what did they have? They had just selective comments on that. First of all, they had the best overall balance between telling an interesting and compelling story and reporting across all the bases diligently. They were the most honest in being open and discussing their challenges and making really good exemplary use of risk frameworks to eliminate that. And finally, they went furthest in relation to reporting actual achievements against the corporate strategy by reporting actually on percentage achievement in a quite detailed set of areas. And I'm delighted to say the winner is the Central Remedial Clinic.
Hello, I'm Mairead Butler and I was in charge of Panel 7. My fellow judges in this category were Bill Cunningham and Brian Lahan, and we had huge accounts to review. These accounts were up to 120 pages in some cases. The charities that were in it were Clúid, Concern, Goal and Trócaire, all substantial charities with delivering hugely important missions. The annual reports, they're around a long time, and their annual reports are of a very high standard. It was only marginal differences in each category of things we saw. Very comprehensive information provided about their mission, specific examples of things that were going really well, concerns that they had, and various different things. In each of them, there was a great explanation of mission and, you know, tiny margins. They had individual stories in a lot of cases, which contributed to our understanding. So they had a big picture of, you know, certain things they were doing, and then examples with pictures and things that actually helped an awful lot to understand it. There was graphs and there was key summary highlights. There was a major impact of COVID, particularly on the ones dealing in the outside of Ireland situation, and also an increased emphasis on safeguarding issues that they had to implement to deal with certain issues that were going on. There were some areas that there are opportunities for development for sure, and these were things like financial risk management. It wasn't always outlined as comprehensively as accountants like us would like it to be. KPIs, especially trends, some of them produced good KPIs, but some people didn't have enough information about trends from the past, in the present and into the future, what their expectation was for key performance indicators, and details of revision to future plans, what was going to change, because certainly the ones that it's in all the cases, they're dealing with different situations and they're moving locations to deal with situations. So what are they going to do in pursuit of those strategic objectives? In terms of the boards themselves, some more information on the composition and the activities of subcommittees would be very useful. They all had subcommittees with external directors on them, with external parties that weren't directors on them. So more information about what the activities of those subcommittees were doing would be very useful to understand. And in many cases, the tenure of directors and the approach to succession planning wasn't outlined with enough information that would be useful for readers to understand. As significant charities, the directors are hugely important in delivering on the mission. And insights into board evaluation and the board's plans in response to it, to those evaluations, will be useful as well. Some of them had that mentioned, but more information on that would be useful. The impact these charities have, both at home and abroad, is phenomenal. The contrast of the lives that they help compared to our lives here, just, it's huge. The staff are inspirational with very high standards of governance, and therefore they command the confidence of the donors who are giving them huge amounts of money to deliver on their very important mission. So we do have a winner in it, and the winner particularly, the panel particularly thought that the things that the winner did well was a very strong emphasis on mission, values and strategy throughout the document. So at each stage, those things were coming through. There was very insightful information for the previous 5 years with very key metrics about what was happening and how things were moving on year by year. So that was actually really, really informative. The identification of impact, huge impact, 36 million people helped in 23 countries, huge. Details of individual programs were provided and examples of successes, and there was an external evaluation done every 3 years of the board. So the winner in this category is Concern. Congratulations to them.
This is the trophy that the winners will get, and usually if we were in person we would have been presenting these trophies to each of the winners, but times they're in, we're not able to do that. But we picked one of the winners and we gave them the heads up that they had won, and they're here with us, the general manager is here with us today. And it was fantastic to, the win in the category, but it was great to see that we have our first time ever winner from a sporting body organisation. I've had conversations with John Tracy and Colin McGinty that really got the concept of Good Governance Award, or want to be involved and have been promoting it. And it's great to see Volleyball Ireland being the first national sporting body to win the Governance Award. So I would like to call up Gary to say a few words on your journey to winning the Governance Awards.
Thanks, Dermot. First of all, I'd like to thank Dermot and the team at Carmichael Centre, as well as all the supporting organisation, judges and entrants that have contributed to such a wonderful event and awards programme. The Good Governance Awards for us aren't a typical awards scheme where you either win or you lose and then you go home. The feedback that you receive on your application is so detailed and comprehensive that you get a fantastic template for improvement, which has been proven today by Volleyball Ireland winning this award, when last year we didn't even make the shortlist. Not only does this improve your annual report, but the awards programme and the feedback helps you also explore and consider other aspects of your governance across the organisation, which is really important to us. It's more than an awards ceremony, it's really a development programme, and Volleyball Ireland are incredibly proud and honoured to be the first sporting body to win this prestigious award, and I would really encourage all sporting bodies or any non-profit to enter next year. I'd also like to thank Sport Ireland for their constant encouragement and consistent support in helping us improve our governance and organisation in general. John, Paul, Shane, Brian, Mel, Sinead and the whole team have provided NGBs with a number of really important training opportunities, templates and other supports that really do make a tangible difference, and your help is very much appreciated. Our annual report was a real team effort from the board, staff and commissions, and I'm thrilled that their hard work has been recognised by industry experts. And we are quite humbled to be amongst some really reputable and high-profile organisations here today. We believe that governance is the bedrock of all successful organisations, and having a strong foundation is key to ensuring growth and development of any sport. And volleyball is a growing sport. Over the last few years, we've grown the number of school teams in our annual competitions to over 900. We now have 56 teams in our national league, and our players have grown by 50% over the last 3 years. Now, there's lots of reasons for that and lots of hard work across the organisation, but having strong foundation of governance is certainly a key part of that. At the start of the year, we made a conscious effort to produce the best annual report we could that would demonstrate the breadth of work that clubs deliver for our sport. We wanted to tell the story of volleyball, both on the court but off the court as well, because there is so much that goes into running a national governing body of sport. But we were really keen not to just tell the good bits. We wanted to be really open and honest, and if we didn't reach a target or we didn't quite hit an objective, we wanted to own up to that, and also to demonstrate what plans and what strategies we're going to put in place to make sure that we did better next time. We feel that our members and funders and partners deserve that level of openness, honesty and transparency. That builds trust, and when you have trust, everyone can then pull in the same direction. And when everyone pulling in the same direction, we believe that you can achieve anything. So we're really proud that our hard work and our annual report and our governance has been recognised here today. And again, we would like to thank the Council Centre, judges, support organisations and all the other entrants for their participation. Thank you.
Congratulations, Gary, and that was fantastic just hearing the journey that you've been through, and it was delighted to hear the sort of entering to learn to improve, taking on those suggestions that you get in your feedback, not getting demoralised or disappointed if you don't get shortlisted, and with that determination to continually improve, and delighted for you and for all the winners tonight, all the category winners. It's an achievement that you should be rightly proud of. It is a recognition of the wonderful work done by your teams, and there's a lot of people behind getting your annual reports out and getting them to the quality that you want. It's an achievement for your organisations, but also it's a recognition of how you treat your stakeholders. Well done to all the shortlisted organisations. I appreciate that you will be disappointed you did not win. But as I said previously, I want to iterate, it is very often just down to very small margins and points of difference that separates the winners from the others. Also, I want to thank all the organisations that have entered the awards and in doing so have demonstrated their commitment to good governance practice and an openness to learn, to improve. As I said previously, every entry will receive feedback, and that feedback is courtesy of the fantastic work done by our assessors in stage 1, the technical assessors in stage 2, and those that have got to the shortlisting, the judges' feedback as well. So it's a very, very comprehensive feedback. So our whole purpose of the awards is to improve standards and to try and help organisations to improve the quality of their annual reports. We're seeing the standards increase in most areas. It was disappointing that we weren't in a position to have a Good Governance Award in Category 1 this year. And I know for organisations, and you're talking about organisations that have turnover less than 50,000, probably no staff, or even if they do have staff, it might be part-time staff. So it is a particular challenge, and we do understand that. And we will continue to work to try and provide training, support and guidance to help organisations to develop their annual report. And I'm hopeful, but no, in fact, I'm confident because I've had very good discussions this week, and I'm saying it now, that the Community Foundation of Ireland and Pobble will be getting involved in 2022 to allow us to put out a training programme and a support programme. So not only will we provide training, we'll provide some consultancy support to go with that training to help the smaller non-profits to prepare a good annual report. We plan to announce the details of the support programme, which will be free, thanks to the generous support from the Community Foundation of Ireland and Pobble, free to the participating organisations, and that will be announced early in the new year. So with that, I would like to conclude this year's Good Governance Awards. Thank all our speakers today, and particularly our key speaker, Helen Martin, for that fantastic address, and wish everybody the very best. Sin Will, go din Blin Chacún, Slán go fóill.